Why? Well, it's because the owners refuse, and I don't blame them, to even acknowledge intent. What the owners to continue to do is put their money in a pile and keep burning it. And the owners...
The tension around this situation comes from something deeper than one proposal or one percentage. It comes from two groups looking at the exact same moment in league history and seeing completely different realities. One side sees explosive growth, cultural relevance, record attention, and believes this is the window to finally secure generational financial change. The other side sees record attention but still sees balance sheets that don't add up, investors that have been funding losses for decades, and a fear that one bad agreement could lock the league into permanent financial instability. What makes this conversation so volatile is how language gets weaponized. Words like scam, greedy, disrespectful, or delusional get thrown around, but real negotiations almost never work in those extremes. In reality, both sides are usually negotiating from risk. Players are negotiating against the risk of short careers, injury, and decades of historical underpayment. Owners are negotiating against the risk of building a structure that mathematically guarantees continued losses with no exit strategy. The gross versus net argument is where most of the emotional heat is coming from, but it is also where the math gets complicated.
The ridiculous revenue sharing scam. There, I just said it out loud. Scam have finally said, much to their credit, frankly. You know what? I'm giving the owners credit. They finally said enough is enough.
Gross revenue models give players guaranteed participation in total growth. Net revenue models protect leagues from collapsing under operational costs. In sports history, different leagues have chosen different paths depending on profitability stage. Some mature leagues can survive gross-style splits because their revenue is massive and stable. Younger or developing leagues often lean toward net models because they are still proving sustainability. The uncomfortable truth is that neither model is automatically right or wrong. It depends entirely on financial reality and growth projections. If a league is on the edge of profitability, gross sharing can push it backward. If a league is massively profitable, net sharing can feel like players are locked out of real growth. That is why this negotiation feels like a philosophical fight disguised as a math fight. There is also a generational factor at play that people do not talk about enough. Veteran players often see this as their last window to capture value from growth they helped create but never fully benefited from. Younger players often see it as setting a baseline for the next 20 years. Owners, meanwhile, are thinking in 10 to 30-year investment timelines. Those three clocks do not tick at the same speed, and that creates friction. The Caitlin Clark effect adds another layer, but it is dangerous to frame everything around one player, even if she has massive influence. Star-driven spikes can accelerate growth, but leagues cannot build long-term financial models on single-player impact. Owners are likely thinking about what happens when the next superstar arrives, or when the current superstar eventually retires or gets injured. Players are thinking about capitalizing on the current surge while it exists. Both viewpoints are rational from their perspective. The housing conversation, while it sounds smaller, is actually symbolic. It is about whether players are treated like full major league athletes or like employees in a developing league. For players, it is about respect and stability during constant travel and relocation. For
that the WNBA Players Union is suggesting. All right, they're one. Either we do a deal that's beneficial for everybody, or the league won't continue.
Owners, it is about cost control during massive salary expansion. Neither side is really arguing about apartments. They are arguing about status and precedent. The biggest risk here is not just a delayed season. It is momentum loss. Sports growth is fragile. When casual fans leave, they do not always come back. Sponsors do not always return at the same level. Media narratives can shift very quickly. Everyone involved likely understands that, which is why the pressure is so high right now. The idea that only one side would be responsible for a work stoppage is usually more complicated in real life. Labor disputes in sports almost always end with both sides claiming partial victory and both sides privately acknowledging they pushed too far at some point. Public narratives tend to simplify things into heroes and villains, but the economics are rarely that simple. The most realistic long-term outcome is usually a hybrid solution. Something like escalators based on revenue growth. Something like profit triggers. Something like temporary higher guarantees that phase into performance-based sharing later. Most modern sports deals end up layered like that because pure fixed percentage systems rarely survive economic cycles. The real question is not who is right morally. The real question is what structure keeps the league alive while also keeping players invested in its success. Because if players feel disconnected from growth, they disengage. If owners feel locked into permanent losses, they reduce investment. Both of those outcomes damage the league. If history across sports tells us anything, it is that stalemates usually break at the last possible moment. Not because one side suddenly changes ideology, but because both sides realize the cost of collapse is worse than the cost of compromise. If this were being designed from scratch, the smartest path would likely involve staged revenue sharing that increases automatically as profitability increases, combined with transparency mechanisms that build trust over time. That way players participate in upside without forcing immediate unsustainable payouts, and owners have a roadmap to cost stability. At the end of the day, this is really a negotiation about what the WNBA wants to be in 10 years. A fully profit-driven business with controlled spending, or a growth-focused cultural sports property willing to operate at thinner margins to dominate market share. Those are not just accounting decisions. Those are identity decisions. If this gets solved, it will likely be because both sides realize they need each other more than they need to win the argument. Because leagues do not survive on math alone. They survive on cooperation between talent and capital. And right now, both are trying to protect their future in very different ways.